Number 5.
Chained Together is an online co-op platformer utilizing Unreal Engine 5. The main mechanic is the physics-based chain, binding players together and restricting their movement, with the goal being to climb out of the depths of hell by working together, and it supports up to 4 players. I believe Chained Together is a great example of the game dev advice you'll often hear about making smaller games that mostly focus on a single fun mechanic. When it released in June 2024, it quickly went viral, getting picked up by a sizable amount of popular content creators with many videos reaching millions of views. On Steam, it has an estimated net revenue of over $2.3 million, and this is currently the only platform it's available on, disregarding shameless copycats on mobile. I actually couldn't find much information about the development of this game, and I definitely don't want to give this man any money just to try to reach out to the developer. But some sources state that Chained Together was made by a solo developer, while Anagar Games would often say we or our in their tweets about the game. But that's actually a technique some solo devs use to make the team seem bigger. Either way, Chained Together seems to have been created in a rather short amount of time, heavily utilizing marketplace assets. And it's a great example of a profitable indie game made with Unreal Engine 5.
Number 4.
Wandering Sword is a Chinese martial arts RPG that on first glance looks very similar to Octopath Traveler, and was also created using Unreal Engine 4. What sets it apart from other RPGs is the fact that it draws a lot of inspiration from Chinese fictional stories called wuxia. And instead of featuring high fantasy-based classes, it incorporates various martial arts. The Shanghai-based developer, the Swordman Studio, started work on this game with only 3 developers, but after securing a publishing deal with Spiral Up, were able to expand their team to 13 passionate members. Development on Wandering Sword lasted 4 years until release, and even though they planned on a shorter development cycle, feedback they got during playtests made it clear that they had to increase the volume of available content. But outside of that, feedback was very positive, and on Steam the game currently has an estimated net revenue of over $7 million. With console versions and physical releases maybe happening in the future. I believe Wandering Sword is a great example of how to take inspiration from other games and copy some of their elements, while still changing enough to make something new and unique. It manages to emulate the HD 2D art style popularized by Octopath Traveler quite well, but sets itself apart through a completely different setting and tactics style combat. And I actually created a 17-hour course on how to create 2D top-down games in Unreal Engine 5, with the last project featuring a very similar art style to this. So if you want to learn how to make HD 2D looking games in Unreal, check out the discount link in the description.
Number 3.
SoulCalibur 6 is a 3D fighting game created with Unreal Engine 4 by Bandai Namco Studios and DIMS. Outside of the excellent weapon-based combat, the character creator, and an unusually extensive single-player offering, the SoulCalibur series was always known for its cutting-edge graphics. And I think it's fair to say that they again set a new bar for fighting game graphics when SoulCalibur 6 released in 2018, and it even managed to still look great today. According to multiple interviews I was able to dig up, the development team was extremely satisfied with Unreal Engine 4, since it allowed for rapid prototyping and for them to instantly see changes while the engine was running. With their development process on previous titles, it would take a very long time before anything can be seen on screen, but UE4 allowed them to have near-final visuals up and running very quickly. Okubo-san, the producer, also mentions how the Blueprint visual scripting system was a key factor for allowing rapid development, and it was used for nearly everything outside of the core fighting mechanics. For the battle system, they actually brought over their C++ codebase from previous SoulCalibur titles, and connected it to Unreal through external codebase integration, creating an interface between Unreal and their pre-existing code. Since fighting games have pre-established core systems and you want to make sure not to change too much between iterations, this is a quite common practice, and I believe to have heard that Guilty Gear Strive and XR do something similar. SoulCalibur 6 was also their first title to release on PC, while also being available on PS4 and Xbox One. This is another point where Unreal Engine was a great choice due to its scalability and built-in multi-platform support. On a personal note, I absolutely loved this game and actually played it competitively for multiple years. When I was a game dev student, I also managed to get invited to a portfolio event at Bandai Namco Studios, and was aiming for a programming position. However, at that point, work on the first DLC season was about to conclude, and even if I made it through the entire interview process, chances are I would have ended up working on something completely different. So even though I love the SoulCalibur series, I chose a different path, and looking back at it, that was the right call.
Number 2.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is an Unreal Engine 1 game released in the year 2002. In this fan favorite, the main game mechanics consist of casting spells, solving puzzles, and going on about your student activities in Hogwarts. However, you can also take part in side activities such as dueling and even Quidditch matches. which in some ways makes this superior to Hogwarts Legacy. One thing to keep in mind is that there are many different versions of the Chamber of Secrets, and only the PC and Mac versions were created using Unreal Engine. To this day, many people still believe that Unreal should only be used for gritty, photorealistic first-person shooters. But this game is a great example how even back at the very beginning of Unreal that was just not true. I believe Unreal's particle effects, lighting system, level creation tools, and the overall graphical fidelity it offers made Unreal a great fit for this game.
Number 1.
Rivals of Aether started out as a simple platform fighter made by a handful of people, but over the years grew into a multi-million-dollar franchise with many spin-offs. Quite recently, Rivals of Aether 2 released, which is their first title created with Unreal Engine 5. The move from 2D to 3D wasn't easy though, and first teased in 2020 at Rivals Direct 2, a Nintendo Direct style presentation about everything Rivals of Aether. It only shows off a couple of 3D characters and animations within a modeling software, and also what appears to be Unity, based on this dreadful background that reminds me of how I got started with Gamedev.
Wait, was that a 3D model?
Well, that's all the time we have. Thanks, everyone.
At this point, Rivals 2 was in pre-production with 3 team members doing modeling and prototyping. 1 year later at the Rivals Direct 3, we got a proper announcement with gameplay footage showing off a Zetterburn 1v1. At this point there hasn't been any talk about game engines yet, and considering that this looks drastically different from the final product, it might have still been a prototype in Unity. 2 years later at Rivals Direct 5, Rivals 2 made another appearance, this time showing off a new character and looking a lot better. And in the recap post about this event, studio lead Dan Fornace officially confirmed that this is in fact running on Unreal Engine. Even though the first Rivals was never meant to be supported for that long, they kept on patching it and adding new content for roughly 8 years. This time around, they wanted to create a solid foundation they'd be able to keep supporting much easier, and I assume outside of Unreal's graphical fidelity, the mature feature set, availability of talent, and scalability were all factors in choosing this engine. There's also a great article by 80 Level letting us take a look at their character and VFX creation process. They mention how for a small team like them, it's important to keep the art pipeline smooth. And in order to make creation of alt skins easy, they kept their UVs unmirrored to be able to reuse the texture and mesh layout. They also mentioned that they tried post-processing for toon shading early on, but ended up using a classic inverted hull approach for outlines in the end, since that gave character artists more control. Another interesting aspect is that they don't use Unreal's default lighting and none of the characters are hit by lights directly. Instead, they use unlit materials as the base and then construct the lighting through color curve assets to define the shading, creating this highly stylized look. Visual effects would be finalized in Unreal Engine 5, but the tools in the steps before that might differ depending on the FX artist, with some preferring Maya and others Blender. Sprite sheets for effects would be created in Photoshop or Toon Boom Harmony. And the artist took a lot of inspiration from the effects in Super Smash Bros. At the end, Dan Fornace also talks a bit about the game design aspects and how the tools available in training mode are actually the same they used during development. These allow you to view frame data, display hitboxes, and also let the game play out frame by frame. He also has a separate blog post with 10 tips for making fighting games that anybody interested in the genre should definitely read. All in all, there's a lot about game development we can learn through looking at Rivals of Aether and its success story. And that's it for this episode. If you want to see more, like the video and subscribe. And also let me know in the comments what you think about this new video series and which game you learned the most from. By the way, this series was inspired by StayAtHomeDevs, 5 games made in Godot to inspire you, which just kept on popping up in my recommendations, so a big shout out to him. My plan is to release 1 new episode per month if you think it's valuable, so make sure to give me feedback. As always, thanks to my awesome patrons.